Hey everyone, it's Charlie Morgan here. Now, I've made more than $25 million with an online business since the age of 18. And recently, I asked 100,000 early stage entrepreneurs what they most wanted to know about business and becoming successful with an online company. And what I've got on my laptop here are the top 10 questions that were most rated from this group of people, and I thought it might be helpful for you if I go through and answer them today. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question we have on the table here is from Rec3515, which is, how do I switch from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset so hard that it becomes ingrained in my unconscious? Pretty good question. So, well, I did this myself when I was 18 years old. And what you have to do is, first of all, understand how the brain works and how your unconscious mind works. Basically, whenever you have an experience, which is simply an emotional reaction to the manifestation of reality in your immediate sensory experience, it gets buried into your memory, whether you remember it or not cognitively, and you can actually recall it. Like, everything that ever happens to you gets sort of buried into a deep level of your brain. And your perception of reality, and therefore your mindset, is hinged on and dependent upon all of these experiences and the aggregate and culmination of these things that happen to you over the period of your life. And the problem is, for most people, is as they grow up, they don't experience abundance, right? And so all of their sensory experiences, whether it's, dealing with money or people with money or anything like this, or business success, all they see is suffering, difficulty, and scarcity. And what that means is, when they come to try and build a business, the perception they have of how money works and how business works, with it being scarce, interferes with their ability to actually become successful. So an abundance mindset is pretty straightforward to develop. What you have to do is you have to, and I know this sounds pretty rudimentary, make a list of things you wish were true and just read them to yourself 10,000 times. And I know that this works because I actually did it myself. I told myself that money is abundant and that success is abundant and success comes easily to me, and these other sort of, woo-wah statements. I told myself these every single day, 3-4 times a day for about 2 years. And at the beginning, I didn't see any change. But what starts to happen is, every time you state something and you feel an emotion associated with that statement, you create a new experience. So if I said right now, I love the fact and I am over the moon that success is so easy to come by and that success for me is just something that happens without a problem. If I tell myself that, at the beginning, I'm not going to believe it. But if I do that every single day for 6 months, I'm going to start to buy it. And that unconscious part of my brain is going to be ever so slightly rewired every time I say it. Now, the secret to this is also understanding that if you want to rewire the unconscious part of your brain, you have to create an image in accordance with the statement. So just saying it is not enough. You have to actually create a sort of almost, artificial sensory experience in your imagination. And then you must feel the emotion that comes with that. So just saying, I believe that money and success is abundant, is not going to change your mind or your mindset. But if you say, I believe that money and success is abundant and I love the fact that this is true, and then if you shut your eyes and you actually picture yourself in a car or with like loads on a bed of money or something, or some sort of vivid image that denotes financial abundance, then you'll start to believe it. Because the only way that you really create belief systems is from emotional reactions to sensory experiences. And right now, you probably don't have the immediate sensory experiences in your reality, like, a view of the palm, to confirm that money is abundant. So you have to create them in your head first. And this is how the manifestation game works. So you see it in your head, you feel it, you change those belief systems, and before you know it, you'll start believing it. And you'll start to realize that money is abundant if you believe that it is. And so that's the answer to the first question. That's exactly how I rewired my unconscious mind to go from scarcity to abundant mindset. So the second question we've got on the table here is from Q Miller, which is, how did you overcome your fear of success and feelings of not being worthy and sabotaging all of my successes just this side of the finish line? Well, self-sabotage doesn't really exist. And I'm going to explain this to you, and hopefully it will blow your mind, as it blew mine when I figured this out. What you've got to understand is you are infinitely complex. As it stands at the moment, you are a human being. You have an identity and a persona and a sense of self. But what you have to understand is that on an unconscious level, on a deep psychological level, you are basically a machine made of different components, and there's different pieces of you. I want you to imagine for a second that your psychology is like a big boardroom table. Okay? Big boardroom table in a corporate meeting room. And sat around that table are a number of executives. And at the end of the table, we have the chair of the board. Now, the chair of the board represents your conscious identity. That's your thinking person. That's you as you believe it to be. That's your identity. But the thing is that around this board, alongside your conscious identity and who you think you are executives. And these executives represent different unconscious forces. And so let's say, for example, that I have someone on my board of directors called Introverted Charlie. And let's say that Introverted Charlie, like these executives, they need to get what they want. Everybody on this board wants the same thing, but they all want to do it in a way where they fulfill their needs and don't have to go through pains they don't want to go through. So if I have Introverted Charlie sat at this table, my responsibility is making sure that Introverted Charlie gets what he needs whilst we can, still make progress towards this goal. And so, for example, you're not self-sabotaging. It doesn't exist. You cannot sabotage yourself. These unconscious forces, they are benevolent. They want the best for you because they are part of you. And so when you come to start working and you try and become successful and you try and make progress and you break it all down and burn it all down, it's because part of you is being ostracized and a member of this board is being shunned and pushed down, and it's basically kicking and screaming because it needs to get what it wants. And so you need to figure out what forces of your unconscious are trying to get what they want, and they will communicate with you through emotions. And so, for example, I can give you a perfect example recently. I have to make these YouTube videos to grow my YouTube channel and for my business to become successful. I have to talk to dozens and dozens, 20, 30 team members every day. I have a social life and I have all these things. And I have inside of my psychology Introverted Charlie. In the same way that I might have conscientious Charlie or status-driven Charlie or, any articulate Charlie or wants to look smart Charlie or, wants to learn Charlie or, wants to be loved Charlie. Like you've got all these different little components. And the introverted Charlie, sometimes I'll feel a lot of resistance towards making a YouTube video because I have to get on this camera and put myself in front of people, which introverts tend to not like doing. But I negotiate with this part of myself because it will, if I don't negotiate with it, I will sabotage. It will sabotage my efforts to do YouTube because it doesn't want to. And so what I've learned to do is give it what it needs outside of the YouTube thing. So for example, if I need to, I will spend an entire day by myself, locked in my room, talking to no one, if I know that that's what I need. And by doing that for one day of the week, then for the other 6 days of the week, that introverted part of me has got what it needs and it won't feel the need to sabotage, my extroverted efforts to get what it needs. Another example I could give you is status Charlie. So, part of me wants to be seen as a man of value and status above other men and wants to be, wants to outcompete. And this thing used to manifest with my buying behaviors. I started buying like cars. I nearly bought like a Rolex, and I started like going down this sort of route of materialism. And I sat down and I negotiated with it, obviously not verbally, but I was aware of it. And I told myself, if you want status, the only way I'm going to let you get it is if you make YouTube videos. And, and if you outcompete your competitors, and your status is now going to come from having the best product on the market and making the best videos, as opposed to people looking at you because, of a car or something like that. And so what you need to do is you need to understand these fragments of your identity and what they need and want, and then see how you can negotiate with them and make your work the vehicle for them getting what they want. And so introverted Charlie now knows that in order for him to, be able to have that time to himself, he needs to have the money to do it. And therefore, he's not going to sabotage the work efforts because he knows that that's how he gets what he wants. And so it all comes back to this idea of imagining that you are the chair of a board and all of the boardroom members, they all want what they need. And if they don't get what they need, then they will break things down and sabotage them. And this is why monk mode just doesn't work. Because monk mode satisfies the need of one or two people on the board, and the other 8 or 9 that are sat around don't get what they want, which is why you go up and then you go down and you go up, and you think it's self-sabotage because you're sabotaging what you consciously want and are aware of. But there's many, many layers of your psychology that you're painfully and probably blissfully unaware of that you need to address and understand. And so self-sabotage doesn't exist. You're not sabotaging your success. Part of you is just screaming at you because it needs something that you're not giving it. So I hope that helps. So the next question we've got here, which is perfectly transitioned from the last question, is you've talked a lot about Jungian psychology in a bunch of videos. Regarding that, what are the specific steps you took to make the unconscious conscious? Well, it's kind of ironic because I literally just explained like kind of how to do it. So for those of you who don't know, Carl Jung was a psychiatrist. He was a Swiss psychiatrist. He was born in 1875, and he kind of is like the founding father of modern day psychology alongside some other people like Freud, etc., etc. And a quote that summarizes Jung's work to a T is that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And so this nicely, segues from the previous points I was making about how you go up and down and you have these ups and downs. And until you make the unconscious forces that drive your behavior conscious, you're just going to you're going to be pulled in all these different directions. Your life is going to be like your body's just a puppet to these things, and you're just going to go in these random directions, and you're going to end up somewhere and say, oh, this is just fate, when really it was just your unconscious just sort of moving things around without you being aware of it. So how do you make the unconscious conscious? Well, there's a pretty simple idea to do this, is that anytime you feel an emotion, and anytime an emotion is present, a unconscious part of you is trying to talk to you and tell you something. And so this was kind of Jung's idea, and it's pretty brilliant, because you've got to realize these parts of you, these little personas that you have in your identity, they can't talk to you. They can't use words, and they can't just come up in a daydream and just you can't just visualize them and they'll tell you what they want. That's not how it works. Like if there's a deep part of you that needs to be loved, it's not going to just tell you. It's going to make you feel lonely, and it's going to make you obsessed with watching romantic movies and stuff like that. And so what you can learn to do is understand that every time an emotion is present in your life, every time that you feel sad, happy, lost, angry, any sort of extreme emotion, a deep part of you is trying to communicate, because emotions are the first gateway to communication with the unconscious. Now, there's two other ways that you can communicate with these things. The first is just look at what you like. Look at what rivets you. Look at what engages you. It's a pretty good way to get an understanding. Like if you're obsessed with, I can give you an example. There's a Netflix show called Emily in Paris. You might be familiar with it. And it's about this woman called Emily who moves from Chicago to Paris for her marketing job. And then she's living in Paris, and she's this independent woman who has loads of romantic flings, and she's seduced and all these French men, and she seduces them. And she has this whole sort of crazy, wild, hot girl summer in Paris. And Emily in Paris is one of the most popular Netflix shows among young women. I think, God, if I can figure them out, that'll be the day, right? But from the market research I've done, my sister watches the thing, a bunch of my friends watch the thing, their friends will watch this thing. This is an example of a collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is basically where a mass sort of aggregate of psychology is focused and centered on one thing. And so when a Netflix show comes along and just sweeps entire society and nation or culture off of its feet in terms of attention, that's a pretty good sign that there's the unconscious at play, and that something that these people want is being portrayed in that, inside of that sort of archetype. So another example is like Harry Potter, for example, the sort of, the friends that, do the sort of misbehave but fight evil, but, they're sort of subverting authority at the same time. Like all of these things that just come along and just you just seem absolutely riveted by, that's your unconscious telling you what it wants and what it needs. And so all of these people who are watching Emily in Paris, they're riveted by this girl who's off on an adventure on her own, being independent, being really competent in her job, and basically having all of these romantic flings. That's a pretty good indication that that's what a lot of people want these days. And so Emily in Paris, or all of these movies, they're not just created, they're based off of these psychological needs. And whether a movie or a book becomes mainstream and successful, and even to a degree whether a song becomes mainstream and successful, is hinged entirely upon how much it resonates with the collective unconscious or psychology of the masses of society. And so, if you're watching movies and, TV shows and stuff like that, and you're becoming emotional and you're reading books, that's a pretty good window into what you want. And, you don't know why you want it, but you just seem to want it. It's the same thing with the hero archetype, which underpins pretty much the entirety of every action movie ever. A lot of men are obsessed with the hero archetype, and if you're not watching it on a movie, you're either playing it in a game or you're trying to act it out in real life. So, which the hero archetype is basically just, I'm not who I want to be. I'm going to go off on an adventure and learn something about myself and come back and make my community a better place. That's kind of the whole, thing. Or slaying the dragon and getting the virgin behind the dragon and the pot of gold or whatever. Like, it manifests in lots of different ways, but that's ultimately what we want. And so how do you make the unconscious conscious? Your emotions, and then what we're riveted by and what we're obsessed by. For example, I'm reading tons and tons of history books at the moment. I'm completely obsessed with conquerors, so that's a pretty good indication as to what part of my unconscious wants to see and wants to become. Obviously not a dictator conqueror, but at least a leader of men and changer of the world, so to speak. And the third one is your dreams. Now this gets a little bit woo-wah, and I still don't know if I buy this or not, but Jung certainly did. And that is that your dreams. So when you're asleep, and you have these vivid, imaginary experiences that aren't real, that can certainly seem real if it's a nightmare, or another type of dream, if you know what I mean. Like, they can give you like a pretty good indication as to what your brain's trying to tell you. So I'm sure you've had a dream before. I mean, I certainly have, where you've woken up and you instantly know exactly what your brain's trying to tell you, what it means. This happens to me, at least once a week. So it's another pretty good window into your unconscious. So those are the 3 ways you can do that. And I think that answers that question. So now that we've had that little harrowing window into your unconscious, let's move on to number 4. This is from Mad Tokyo Rave, which is a cool name. How to actually decide what to do in life. How to find purpose. This is something that I've done pretty damn well in the last year. Like, I have finally been able to know exactly what I want to do with my life. And segueing on from the previous point, there's a book that was released after World War II called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And it's one of the most best-selling self-help books in the world. And just to solidify my previous point, like, if a book is a bestseller, you can look at the title to understand what the mass psychology or unconscious wants. So if a book's called Man's Search for Meaning and lots of people are buying it, then it's a pretty good indication that unconsciously we're searching for meaning. The fact that this question has got lots of upvotes is also an indication of that. So that's just a point to reinforce that psychology. But anyway, how do you find purpose? Well, okay, think of it like this. So there's not really much point in trying to find a virtuous purpose or trying to find your life's meaning until you have the means to do so. So let me explain this with a metaphor. I want you to imagine that you are stranded on a desert island. And you've been left on a desert island by yourself with a pocket knife and some flint and steel or whatever. And when you get on that island, you're not really going to be concerning yourself with what's the purpose of me being here? Like, why am I here on this island? Why? Like, you're not going to ask that. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to secure water and food and shelter. And, you're going to, sort of try and build like a house, and you're going to make sure that you've got enough to eat and enough to drink and that you're not dying, And it's only once you've sorted out these basic survival needs that you can then go on to start to, ask yourself why you're here. And then you might maybe you build a church or a place of worship, or, maybe you start making art and stuff like that, and you can find your calling. But my point here is this: in business, your business can become a vehicle and a way for you to project your deepest, desire of purpose onto. So for example, my business serves the purpose of me fulfilling my life vision, which is to make it so that every entrepreneur who wants to succeed does. And until you have got a significant level of financial success, it is incredibly hard to do that, because what you have to do to find true, genuine, connected purpose is transcend lots of different levels of psychology in that sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid that you might be familiar with. So as a human, if you're in the first world country, you've probably got your, shelter, water, and food down to a T, which is fantastic, right? Go you. But above that, then you need to sort out your social life to make sure that you've actually got connections with other human beings. Like, asking yourself, what's my life's purpose? If you haven't even got a group of friends yet, it's a waste of time, because your brain prioritizes things, and your unconscious will prioritize things based on how close they are to the needs of your brainstem. So your brainstem is basically like the root of your brain, and it's where all of these primal drives come from. And until that limbic system is satisfied, ain't no way. So if you have a deep desire to be loved and to be in an intimate relationship, and you haven't got that in your life, it's very hard to create this insane, grandiose vision if you're not fulfilling basic needs. So, my point here is this. You need to transcend the desire for status. You need to transcend the desire for freedom. And only once you've done those two things can you go on to find a higher purpose. If you are wanting to, travel the world and be in Bali, then Thailand, then Miami, then Dubai, then the UK, then Portugal. Like if you want freedom and to travel and you want the laptop lifestyle and that's what you truly want and you haven't got that, then you can't create a higher purpose whilst you're doing that. It's just not possible. Same thing if your main concern in life is status and seeming rich and the Instagram posts and the cars and stuff, you're never going to find a true deep purpose if you're trying to if all you want is status. So you need to learn to transcend these things. And this is what I had to do. It's very simple and straightforward to know what your purpose is and to figure out what you truly want to do with your life when you're not psychologically battling with yourself to try and get all the other things that you need. So my point is this: fix your life, first of all. So stop overstimulating yourself and being an idiot. Stop eating shitty foods and hanging around with shitty people. Get your life on track, get your shit together, and actually get yourself in a position where you can think clearly and make good decisions, and then ask yourself the question. Asking yourself, what's my purpose, when you're scrolling through, TikTok 3 hours a day, smoking weed and drinking alcohol, there's just no point. Make your purpose fixing yourself so you can find your purpose, and then you will. Okay? So next up, we have, how do you do everything you already know you should be doing? So this is a good question because, a lot of the time, building a business and becoming successful, making a heap of money, is not really so much about knowing what to do. It's about doing it once you know it. Because figuring out what to do is not that tough. For example, if you want to get to 10K a month, just make 100,000 cold calls. There you go. Now you know what to do. But it's just tougher to do it than it is to figure it out. It's a very straightforward understanding. How do you do what you know you need to do even when you don't want to do it? You need to reframe your relationship with pain. So pain is the uncomfortable emotion or sensation that manifests when your human willpower manifests as effort against resistance. So here's how it works. We have a bit of a face-off between two forces here. You've got a side of you that creates resistance and that basically doesn't want to do the work. And then we've got a side of you that creates willpower and wants to do the work. And what happens is when you use your willpower, to face resistance, you're basically putting in effort. This is doing the work. So when you do something you don't want to do, you are working. That is the definition of work. And the byproduct of work in the short term, in the moment, in the immediate present moment, is pain and suffering. And that sort of, I don't want to do this. And that's what overcoming resistance is. And it sucks and it feels real bad. But here's the thing. Every time you sit down to do the thing you know you need to do but don't want to do, this resistance flies up. And all you have to do is become aware of it and understand that the more pain you put yourself in and the more resistance you face, the more successful you will become. There is a direct relationship and correlation. In fact, it's basically causality between pain and success. And so what I like to do is I like to see resistance as an opportunity to fill up my pain bank. And what you can do with pain is it's like a currency that you can use to bargain with the future or bargain with the universe. And so the more of this pain that you bank and the more sort of, work you put yourself through and suffering you put yourself through, you're just building up this reserve, this sort of metaphorical reserve of suffering, so that in a year's time or 3 years' time, you can go to the universe in the future and say, hey, I will trade all of this suffering and pain for that car or that freedom or that business or that wife or this thing or that body. Easy example is the fitness thing, right? Every time you go to the gym, you don't want to, it fucking sucks, it hurts, you're in pain, you're facing the resistance, but up builds the pain bank, and the bigger it builds, the bigger you get, the better you feel. And so instead of seeing pain as this negative thing that sucks and that you don't want, you need to start seeing it in the same way that you would see dollar bills that you can just pick up off the floor. Every time you have the opportunity to put yourself in pain is another opportunity to literally increase your chances of success. And so this is why my working strategy and my prioritization strategy in my business and my work is find the thing that I least want to do, that is most painful to do, and go and do it. Now, when you actually have a big business, so I'm making $10 million a year now. Still, for me, the most painful thing to do is probably going to be making cold calls and getting rejected. And maybe not actually. maybe not so much. But when you get to that point, you can hire people to do that stuff for you, and you can have a little bit more breathing room with this. But there's always something more painful to work on. Like, for example, I'm working on a new program for my clients right now, and it's going to take me 9 months to build. And it's a course that I'm making, and it's anyone that's ever made content ever, try doing it every day for 9 months, 12 hours a day. It really hurts. So I've isolated the thing that sucks the most, and I'm just building up this bank, baby. And I'm going to come to the market in 9 months' time and say, hey, what will you give me for this? And the answer could be tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the future. Okay? So that's that. It's a matter of perspective. So the next question is, how do you cultivate a burning desire instead of wishing? Well, I think if we bring, what is a wish? You know, I think the answer, the question can be reduced down to this. Like, how do I have a goal instead of a dream? Because you don't want to have dreams. I don't like this idea of a dream, because a dream is something that isn't real. If you define dream, it's like, you know, an imagined, it's like an artificial imagined experience that is never going to come true, never going to happen. You don't want to have dreams. You want to have goals. Now, instead of wishing for things and, you know, hoping that they happen, what you need to understand is that what you want, if we imagine it here, you know, this physical thing that's going to happen, it's basically like a screenshot of the future. So you can imagine that in 5 years from now, you could take a picture of what your life will look like, and that's a future state. Now, there are an infinite number of different, you know, scenarios that could happen into the future, depending on what, you know, mode of course you take and what river you choose to go down. But if you know that what you want is actually possible, then you can stop wishing for it and start understanding that you need to just reverse engineer what causes the effect. So here's how I did it. I told myself when I was 20 or 19 years old that I wanted to be living on the palm, with a dream business, with a big YouTube channel, and, you know, a great group of friends and a great company and all this stuff, and to be the best in my market. And that has now happened. We've got the best results. Things work. Blah blah blah. Besides the point. What I did is I used to dream of that. I would close my eyes and I would basically say, "Oh, I can't. I just wish. I just pray. I'm dreaming that happens." And one day I sort of woke up from that, and I told myself, "Hang on a minute. This is actually possible." There are a series of actions, causes, that if taken in a linear fashion will actually make me successful. Like, if you can imagine it and it is within the laws of physics and nature, then you can have it. It's just a question of consistent action over time. And all becoming successful is, and all achieving that future state you want is just making the right decision at every turn. Think of it like this. Imagine you are in a maze, a huge fuck off massive maze with thousands, if tens of thousands of different turns. And that maze, there's multiple ways out. There's a way out of that maze. All you have to learn to do is take the right turn at every single different section of the maze, routinely, continuously, over and over again, and you will find your way out. And you're not going to do this perfectly at the beginning. If you're walking out the maze, you're going to take a wrong end, you're going to go back on yourself, and you're going to do that thousands of times. But the point is this, is that there is actually a way out. All you have to do is become smart enough and intelligent enough and conscious enough and cognizant enough to make the right decisions at every turn. And once you aggregate those decisions in a linear chain, you'll get out. And that's exactly what becoming successful is it's making the right decisions and taking the right turns every step of the way and learning from your mistakes and not being afraid of falling on your face and fail. And ultimately you find your way out. So once you understand it and see it like that, you should have a desire to make the right decision, not a desire to become successful because, you know, one creates the other. So question number 7 is from Nicholas Chua, 7694. And he says, what metrics do you use to measure the quality of your product or service? Yeah, so this is a really good question, actually. Well, the main thing is the product and the service. It's the most important thing to get right. And it is pretty helpful to have some metrics to make sure that it is right. So the main two that I look at for my company right now are refund rate and dispute rate. So, you know, refund rate is pretty straightforward. How many people ask for a refund? And dispute rate is also pretty straightforward, like how many people dispute the payments that they make to us. Our refund rate right now, if I recall, dispute rate right now is 0.47%, and our refund rate is somewhat similar, which means that 99.5% of our customers are satisfied enough with their purchase to not ask for their money back or dispute the payment. Now, I know a lot of people in the online market, similar to me in this sort of, I run an info business, so I sell online coaching. I sell a course. I'm not afraid to admit it, right? But I know in this high ticket course space, some other guys who have refund and disputes rates of like 25 to 30%. I know people that have been tackled down by the FTC and the FCA, like these big financial organizations from governments, because they've been scamming people and the courses suck. But really, the main metric is that it's refund and dispute rate. That's the easiest way to know if you're doing something right. But second to that, it's like how many testimonials are you getting, and what is your Trustpilot looking like, and how many client interviews are you getting, and like how many win posts are you getting. Now, we've built a system internally for our company that allows us to track customer success, where we send out surveys to customers and we ask them like, how likely are you to send this out to a friend, and how likely are you to do this and that and the other. We haven't launched it or introduced it yet, purely on the premise and because of the fact that we don't want to mess around with the systems because they're working so well right now. So there are lots of other things you can do to track customer success, but we're reluctant to send our clients surveys every single week because we don't want to annoy them because they're getting great results. So if that refund and dispute rate starts hiking up and that starts to become a problem, which I don't see it becoming, but if it does, then we'll start to look for more feedback. You only really have to measure something, and you need to keep a sort of pretty solid understanding of the core metric. And if that thing starts going out of whack, then you start diagnosing. Think of it like health. Like, one great thing to constantly know is your heart rate and your blood pressure and these core metrics that measure your health. And if those things start going out of whack, then you start getting other blood tests and measurements done for your health to make sure that you're not dying. But generally speaking, if something's working, keep an eye on the main metrics, and then you can introduce, more secondary, tertiary, quaternary metrics to sort of diagnose problems. But we don't have a problem with client success, so we don't measure it in too much detail, which might be foolish now that I think about it, but we'll see. So question 8 is from Sahar, which says, what did you learn after reading Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Caesar, Darwin, etc.? Well, Darwin, I'm not going to chuck Darwin in the same category as Caesar and Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan and Napoleon and that, because he wasn't a leader, he was a biologist, and a pretty bloody good one at that. You can pretty much summarize The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin with the quote, it's not the strongest or the fittest that survive, but those most adaptable to the environment in which they find themselves in. That kind of summarizes natural selection. So we're going to cut Darwin out. But as for the rest of them, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Caesar, Hannibal, Frederick the Great. I've read a lot of conquerors and studied a lot of these people. And what did I learn from reading them? Well, the first thing is that you'd be very surprised by the power of leadership. And you'd be very, very surprised by the power of a extremely charismatic, confident person on a mission. Like that, being a good leader, there is something about that is so asymmetric. Like being able to rally people to your cause and have this insane charisma to literally have them sacrifice their lives for you, that's an insane skill to develop. And so, I've been reading these people and learning a lot about leadership. Aside from that, I'll be honest with you, the one thing that I've taken a lot from these guys is how absolutely fucking ruthless they are. Like, there's stories of Julius Caesar, for example. I mean, Genghis Khan is notorious for this, but there's stories of Julius Caesar. He killed like 2 to 3 million Gauls. Now, Gauls, not Ghouls, but Gauls as in like people from Gaul, sort of like modern day France and, in that sort of mid-central Europe during the Roman times. He killed millions. He would, like Alexander the Great, for example, would slaughter villages and towns just to send a message to other people that they should capitulate to him. And so, I learned from these great leaders that sometimes to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, right? And I know that's an extremely insensitive metaphor to use to denote the death of millions of human beings because of some insane conqueror. I'm well aware of that. But these guys were absolutely ruthless and relentless in their pursuit of victory and success. And I admire that to a degree. Not insofar as the fact that it compromises my moral stature, but insofar as the fact that these guys they didn't care. Like, they knew what they wanted and they were willing to do anything they had to do to get it. One thing I learned from Napoleon in particular is the importance of speed. And so, Napoleon really, he modeled a lot of his European campaigns, like Italian campaigns and Egyptian campaigns and stuff like that, off of people like Caesar and Alexander the Great. And one thing that Napoleon was renowned for was how quickly he could march. And so he boasted in his memoirs that he would be able to outmarch Caesar by like twice the speed, which is a pretty insane feat. And that's why he was able to win these battles, is because he was just there way faster. And because, you know, he could assemble his army and get into position and basically gain advantages by being way quicker and way faster than everybody else. Now, that's just one component of his military genius. But another thing I took from these guys is speed. Like the reason the Mongols were so effective and the reason Genghis Khan was such a force to be reckoned with is because his entire army was basically horsebacked. Like they were basically, the Mongols were pretty much just horseback archers, was a huge component of their army. And you can't outrun a horse, you know. And so these guys, you know, if you look at the landmass of their empire, it extends across, you know, the entire Eurasian steppe all the way into Europe. And they conquered so much land so quickly purely because of speed and because of how quickly they could, you know, traverse, you know, different places. And this is the same thing that happened in World War II with the Nazis. And, you know, obviously we all hate them, right? As we rightfully should. But the reason that the Blitzkrieg was so effective in, you know, from 1939 to the sort of the early 1940s before the Allies and America got involved is because of the speed at which the Blitzkrieg happened. And so Germany, they invaded Poland, and then real quick, they go straight to France, straight through the Netherlands, straight into France. Like they were not hanging around. The France thought that, you know, Germany were going to take ages to invade them, so they weren't really ready. And so one thing I learned from all of these great generals, and I'm not calling Hitler a great general, although if you can separate his absolutely disgusting moral premises away from his military strategy, he wasn't a bad strategist. We can take a lot from these guys. And, you know, I heard a quote once that business is the closest cousin to war. And you can determine a lot about how to become successful and run a really good company from, you know, reading from these great conquerors and these great people. You know, Alexander the Great, like, one thing that Caesar did when he was in his 20s was have like a mental breakdown, because he realized that by the time that he was like 25 or 26, before he was actually, you know, he was still going through rising through Rome's political ranks. He was, I think, in Alexander's tomb or something like that. And Caesar had epilepsy, which meant that he suffered with epileptic fits. And it's supposedly happened, his first epileptic fit happened when he found out how much Alexander the Great had achieved at his age. So Alexander the Great started campaigning with his father at like 12 or 14. So by the time Alexander the Great was like 26, 27 years old, he'd conquered the known world. Like, you know, Darius under the Persian Empire, he just destroyed them all in like a matter of years. Then he was renounced, like he was claimed the pharaoh of Egypt, and, you know, the dude just was a monster, and he died at the age of like 30 or whatever. But what happened is, you know, Caesar thought he was this, you know, high-flying, hotshot political operator, which, to be fair to him, he was. But one day he found out, when he was 27 or 26, that Alexander the Great, at his age, had basically conquered the entirety of Persia. And this is when Caesar's epileptic fit started. It's this high standard. These guys hold themselves to such ridiculously high standards. And so whenever I contemplate my achievements and what I've done, I feel a little bit sick and disgusted, not to the level which I'd have an epileptic fit like Caesar did, but it's true. Like, you know, Genghis Khan was like, well, maybe not Genghis Khan so much, but Napoleon, for example, he was given charge of the army of Italy from France in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and he campaigned throughout the entirety of Italy at my age. He led tens of thousands of men and just conquered Italy on behalf of France at my age. He was 26 or like something like 27 or something like that. You know, he sieged Toulon at like similar age, and I'm just here like tapping on a keyboard, just building courses, thinking that I'm successful. Like, when you read these guys, you realize how insignificant you are, and it gives you this new level to strive to. And I think that's been one of the main things that I've taken from these guys, is just being like, holy shit, I'm humbled before the achievements of these great men who achieved infinitely more times than I did when I was my age. And you might look at me and my financial successes and think, damn, he's done well, but there's people who have made themselves billionaires at 25. I ain't shit. So yeah, I learned that. So the 8th question is from Fancy Pants Doido. Sounds a bit strange. What's your favorite song? I've got 2 favorite songs that come to mind. The first one is Weekend by Flume. If anyone has been following me for any period of time, you'll know that I am a big Flume fan. And we're talking like 0.0 top, like 0.00001% listeners on Spotify. Like, I love the guy. So Weekend by Flume, especially the slowed version. And there's a YouTube video like Weekend by Flume slowed. It's beautiful. But then my second favorite song is On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter. Something about that just touches my soul. So I've been listening to those songs for quite a while. And yeah, those are my favorite songs. So the next question we have on the screen here is, what are your best book recommendations on business, sales, and marketing? Okay, well, we'll attack marketing first. There's three marketing books that I've read that I think have changed the way that I market that are extremely good. The first one is Ogilvy on Advertising by David Ogilvy. It's an incredibly good book on advertising and copywriting. The second one is Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz, another incredibly talented copywriter who kind of invented copywriting and like modern day direct response. Like, he's a pretty big deal. And then the last one I'd suggest you read is Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins. Those books are incredibly straightforward to read. Well, they're not straightforward, but they will sort of reveal a lot of truths about marketing. With regards to like best books for like sales and business, like, I don't like to read business books or sales books. In fact, I don't think I've ever read a book on business or sales traditionally. What I like to do instead is I like to ask myself, what is business? Like, what the hell is this discipline that this abstraction that we've created, that we've universally agreed upon that is a thing? Like, it's not really a thing. And business is basically an abstraction that is comprised of disciplines. And so you don't study business. You don't get good at business. You get good at economics. You get good at accounting. You get good at marketing. You get good at psychology. You get good at scientific theory and scientific method. And if you can learn how to basically know everything about everything, then you get good at business. So the best business people I know, the most talented entrepreneurs I know, are multidisciplinary thinkers, which means that they understand that business is basically just like this aggregate of all these disciplines, and you can't just understand one. Now, I can give you an interesting story to back this up. When I was 18 years old, just as I was starting my first businesses, I worked for a shoe brand called Clark's Shoes, and I worked in their customer care department, and I was on the phone answering phone calls like, Clark's customer care, Charlie speaking, how can I help you? And one day, I found out that the CEO of the company was coming in, and the CEO's name was Mike Sherwood. He's not the CEO anymore, but he was. And I found out he was coming in on my day off, and my day off was a Wednesday. So he was coming in on Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. So I make an effort to, I go home, I'm like, I've got my day off. I put a shirt on, I put some fancy trousers on, and I put my suit shoes on at 18 years old. And I go into the office on my day off to speak to the CEO. Now, obviously, this is not normal behavior because everyone was like terrified of this guy coming in. And all my colleagues, there's like 50, 60 people work in this office, and they see me coming. They're like, why are you here? This is your day off, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm here to speak to the CEO. And they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're weird. And in he walks with his entourage, with his court, basically, of everybody else. And everyone goes silent and dead silent. He walks to the end of the room, talks to the manager of the department, and sits down next to one of the duty managers, and she's showing him like some problems with the systems and this and the other. I'm like, this is my chance. When do you ever get the chance to speak to a CEO of $1 billion company? Not very often, right? So I walk over to him, and he kind of clocks me and sees me coming, and I'm walking with intention, right? And I've got this notepad and this pen, and I offer my hand. He looks at me as if to say, like, do you not know who I am? And I say, hey, it's Mike, right? Like, my manager can't believe this. We've got the duty manager, the assistant manager of the department, and the manager of the department all sort of in a row. And I just walk up to this guy, and they're terrified around him. And I just walk up to him, and I'm like, hey, look, how you doing? And he shakes my hand, firm handshake, and is like, oh, how can I help you? What can I do for you? I said to him, look, Mike, I addressed him as Mike, which was probably not a great idea. But I said, Mike, I really want to start my own business one day, and I respect you and your leadership and your competence as a CEO. It wasn't this articulate. It was probably a lot more terrified than this. I said to him, what's one piece of advice that you can give me to become a great CEO? And he looks up from the computer, because he wasn't really paying attention to me. He looks up from the computer, and he cocks his head to the side and looks at me as if to say, Really? Like, you really asking this right now? Like, fair enough, sort of with that sort of that look of respect you get. And the answer he gave me, I'll never forget, he said a couple of words. He said, never ever silo yourself. And I had no idea what this means. So, naturally, intuitively, I said, what do you mean? And he said, you need to know everything about everything. He said, you need to know customer support. You need to know marketing. You need to know product design. You need to know legal. You need to know accounting. You need to know the economics of the business. You need to know research and development. You need to know like international law. You need to know tax. He listed out 15 different departments, basically all the departments the company had. And he said I need to know everything about all of these. And this is my point with this. I'm going here with the business and the sales books and stuff is. You can't just study business. You have to know everything about everything in your business. And you can hire people and outsource, certain things and have people better than you to run departments, but you can't silo yourself. And I remember he told me that and it stuck with me. And, he said, he was like, you're going to, when you're studying business and, you go to do business school or whatever, and you try and read these books, you don't study business. He said, you study these disciplines, and by getting good at each of these things, you get good at business as a whole. So yeah, there's a little story for you and a few books on marketing that I'd recommend. Okay. So the next question we have, and the final question we have, is from Productivity 4623. How to overcome feeling like an imposter when trying to get clients, even if you're talented? Well, you don't really. The problem with this question is the word feeling. Like, when you're starting a business, your feelings don't matter. How you feel has absolutely no bearing or relevance whatsoever to your work and how you should operate and do things. You need to be able to work and march on without giving a single shit about how you feel. There's no room for feeling in business. It's not about how you feel. It doesn't matter if feeling like an imposter makes you uncomfortable. Just do the fucking work. A feeling is basically just your brain, the conditioning of your brain being projected onto an experience. Like, it's not relevant, and how you feel about that thing now is in no way, shape, or form going to be the same as how you feel about it once you've become successful. You'll just see it in a different way. And so the way to overcome a feeling is just to stop caring about it and to be able to proceed in spite of it and to see it as something that is just there, that happens, and that you're just going to do the work regardless. People give feeling and emotions way too much power. Like, you put this feeling and this discomfort and this pain on this sort of pedestal, and you tell yourself this narrative and this story of, I can't do this because it makes me feel bad. Well, what are you, a fucking pussy? It doesn't matter. Stop caring about how you feel. Stop giving this little childish intent of your brain the satisfaction of slowing you down and bringing you down just because you feel a certain way. I have no patience for that. You shouldn't either. I do shit I hate all the time, and it makes me feel like shit, and it makes me become more successful. If your goal demands it of you, that's all that matters. Throw aside your emotional state and how you feel and just get the job done. And that's it. See you in the next video. Subscribe if you want.